Hi, my name is Mike. Thanks for joining me today on my channel, Technically Church, where I share over 20 years of experience in audio, video, lighting, and multimedia. You can always find out more on my website at technicallychurch.com. Let's jump in. Today I'm going to walk you through my board setup here at the River Church. Just thought it might be a little helpful to see a real-world example of how I'm using the Behringer Wing at an actual church. So let's jump in. So I'm going to go channel by channel, section by section, just walk you through literally everything that I have set up on this board with some explanation as we go. So when I run the board, I use my user 1 and 2 layers, but let's start with the channel layers. So these may be a little out of order. Maybe you're saying that as we go along, but that's again because I organize it the way I want it in my user layers. So starting with channels 1 through 12 here on the board, I have 6 wireless vocal mics always patched in for our band. So channels 1 through 6 are all vocal mics. Then I have 2 acoustic channels, so acoustic 1 and acoustic 2. Then I have 2 electric channels, electric 1, electric 2. So these are stereo channels. I have my stereo keys channel, a stereo pads channel, so that's for a real pads player. Then if we jump down to 13 through 24. So now on channel 13, I have my bass channel. Now we do use multitracks.com playback, so I have, we use every bus that they have. So they have 16 buses, so I do have 16 channels on this board from Multitracks. So I label those with a T. So next would be my track piano channel. Next would be my track bass channel. And just for clarity, we are using Dante. So we're getting all of these channels from Multitracks playback to the board individually over Dante. So track piano, track bass, I have 1 open channel here. Then I have my drums. I have a kick, a snare top, a snare bottom, a hi-hat, 2 tom microphones, and an over left and an over right. Jump down to 25 through 36. These are all track channels. So we have track drums, percussion, loops, open channel, track keys, track electric, 2s, track acoustic, track strings, track pads, track electric 1s, track effects, and track aux. Okay? So if we jump down to 37 through 40 and the auxes, this is where I have my pastor's mics and some different things. So I have 2 headset mics in these first 2 channels here. I have a handheld mic for one of our pastors here. I have my ProPresenter 7 audio coming in here. And then I just have what I call iMac, and that's a cable that I have next to the Behringer Wing if I want to plug in my laptop or whatever. So I have a channel for that. Then I have 3 more blank channels here. The next channel is comm, so I do have our comm wired in. I can send that to various in-ears. I have what I call a director's in-ear that I use comm and stuff like that. So comm, then click, then our guide channel, and then a talkback channel. Okay, so that's every real channel 1 through 48 using the 8 aux ins. I think I have 4 or 5 open channels currently. All right, now let's jump down to my user layers. So on any given Sunday, I take all those available channels and I just do some very minor adjustments on my user layers, and this is how I run the board. So typically, I would run user 1 across here for the band. So it's going to be very similar, but I'm taking out instrumentation that I'm not using for that week. So in user 1 layer, I have my 6 vocalists. Again, I only have 1 acoustic, 1 electric, I have 1 acoustic, 2 electrics patched in, keys, and then in this specific week, we didn't have an actual pads player or an actual bass player, so I have my track pads and my track bass patched in right there. I say patched in, it's just configured on this user layer. And then again, if I move over to this section, but still on user layer number 1, here's all my loops channels that I'm using this week. So my track loops, my track keys, track electrics, track effects, track strings, and track aux. And then this last channel here I have set for my delay because I like that right on the main layer so that I can feather that delay in and out. That's my vocal delay. Over here I have my DCA groups, which I'll go over in a second. So if we jump down to user layer number 2, it's just my drums right here. So I typically can dial those in and then use a DCA for drums and be pretty happy. But again, if I need it, it's on user layer 2. There's all my drums. I do have a few open here. And then my user 2 in this section are my pastor's mics and my Pro Presenter machine. And then again, my DCAs over here. So let's talk about DCAs for a minute. I do have 4 available at all time, but I do have more DCAs than that. So if we go to DCAs, I will talk about them all. So I have an all DCA, and the way that I run that is not all faders, it's all band, okay? So my all DCA is every vocalist and instrument in the band. It doesn't include my pastors or my Pro Presenter machine, stuff like that. So I have an all DCA, all my vocalists, all my instruments, and all my drums. So that's DCAs 1 through 4. Then I have a DCA for tracks, for effects, and for all the pastors' mics together. So then if I jump over to that user 1 layer, I'm only using 4 primarily at a time. And usually what I have exposed is my all, my drums, my tracks, and my effects. So that's what I use the most. All right, let's run through buses real quick. So if we start with bus 1, I have 6 wireless in-ear packs that go with my 6 wireless vocalists. So I have in-ears 1 through 6 on buses 1 through 6. Then I have a director's in-ear monitor that I use. Excuse me. I have a bus set up for our background vocalists, which we send to our P16 personal monitors. So any of our background vocalists go in there. That's bus 8. Bus 9 is my talkback bus. All of my talkback mic and some extra things that I want the band to hear are in that bus. I have all of my tracks in a bus, so that's bus 10. That gets sent back to the musicians. I have all of my drum mics together in a bus, so that's bus 11, and that gets sent back to the musicians in their ears. I have what I call a lead vocal bus, so every song I put one vocalist in that, whoever's leading, because it changes, and then I send that back to the Behringer P16 personal monitors so that they always can have that leader up, and it would be whoever leads that song. So that's bus 12 as my lead vocal. I've got a channel for stream reverb, so I add a little bit of reverb into our live stream on bus 13. My vocal reverb is 14, my vocal delay is 15, and I have a channel set up for stage wedges for special things. We don't use them every week. All right, let's jump over to the main matrix section. So I use currently 3 mains. I have a main 1 is left-right mains. Main 2 are my subs, so I would call that aux-fed subs, right? I only send certain channels to my subwoofers, so I run those off of a separate main. Not currently using main 3, and main 4 is set up for my live stream. So I have every channel set to go to main 4 post-fader. So it's essentially my front of house mix, but then I can make adjustments in that stream as needed. Okay, so that's how I have my mains set up there. This top right section I have configured for my 3 pastors mics and Pro Presenter, so they're always visible. Those are on, user layer 2 here, so it's a duplicate here. I've got my 2 ear mics here for the pastors, I've got my handheld for the pastor, and I've got Pro Presenter in both of these spots. But this is always visible up here, so I can always see the fader level, I can change it, and I can mute it up here. All right, let's talk about our user-defined key sections real quick. So down here, primarily this bottom section I have on show control. I do use shows quite heavily. So obviously you've got your previous, next, and go to control your shows. So I pretty much leave that on show control all the time. I do have some mute groups set up, but I rarely use them. I essentially use my DCAs as mute groups to fade those in and out. So I do have a mute all and what I call an invitation mute, which leaves my keyboard player on for during prayers and stuff like that. So I have that set up there. And then up here, I have a couple pages set up. So my page 1 for my user-defined keys is actually how I set up this top right section. So I have, again, the pastor's mics and Pro Presenter configured here, but then that mirrors up here. So I really don't use page 1 here. Page 2 I use during rehearsal only, and it's shortcuts to do sends on fader for all of my wireless in-ears. So I have sends on fader shortcuts for in-ear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Just at a push of a button, I can go in and out of sends on fader for those buses. I also, on this layer, have my vocal delay tap. So during rehearsal, I always have a tap for my vocal delay here. If we jump up to layer 3, this is where I would go for during the service. Again, I have another vocal tap. It's the same tap, it's just on both layers. So during my service, I'm doing a lot of tapping for that vocal delay there. And then I have some emergency buttons. So we do external processing for a few of our channels, which I'll explain in a second. So we send those channels out over USB to Ableton, do some waves processing, they get sent back in. So in an emergency situation, if this computer were to crash, I would lose those channels. So I have two buttons here called on Ableton and off Ableton. They're just override buttons for if this were to crash, I can hit off Ableton, it disables that external processing and I get my channels back. If I get the computer back, I can hit on Ableton, it re-enables, re-engages that external processing, and I get the channels back through waves. So that's the only pages that I'm using here. You obviously have a lot more you could use. My talkbacks, I have an A and a B set up. So A goes to the entire band, B only goes to my worship leader. So I have those two talkbacks set up, and I do have a talkback mic always sitting here that I can use. All right, let's just talk very briefly about that external processing. I do have a video that explains how to set it up if you're interested. So I do send all 6 of my vocal mics out for external processing. I send my kick mic, my kick drum mic, and both of my snare mics out, and I send my primary pastor's vocal mic out for processing, in addition to some live stream stuff. So just really quickly, if I go to vocal 1, and you have your effects racks, okay, so if I go, you get 16 effects processors, okay, so that can be reverb, delay, you know, any sort of effects that the board has built in. They do have like built-in pitch correction and all sorts of stuff. So you can insert those in the effects rack. But you also have the option to do an external, so when you go to settings, you can do an external effects rack. So I have an external effects rack set up. And what that gives you is an insert return. So I can say the channel is coming in, you know, using this routing, and then it's going to go, I'm using USB to go out to Ableton, process with a bunch of waves plugins, and then it returns, in this case, on USB 6. So what this gives me the option to do is, you know, I can turn that on and off, which essentially is, do I want to route it without the waves processing, or turn it on, and I route it with the waves processing. So that's what those override buttons would turn on and off. And then the reason I do it this way, using the external effects rack, rather than just direct patching, which you could do, but if you direct patch, any processing that you do would go to the vocalist's in-ears as well, and you may not want that. So I do it in this effects rack, and then I just make sure that my tap point is before that effects rack, so that what they get in their ears is the raw signal, then I get it, I process it with waves, and then I can send it back out to front of house. So that's a really quick overview of the entire board that I use here on a weekly basis. You know, I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I do have a stream deck up here that I control all sorts of things with. You can check out one of my other videos on that. I'm controlling Pro Presenter. I'm controlling Blackmagic video switchers, Blackmagic video hubs. I'm controlling my Grand MA lighting console on there. All sorts of different cool, fun stuff on that stream deck. So I have that as well. Thanks for joining me today. Again, my name is Mike. You can always find out more on my website, technicallychurch.com, or on my YouTube channel, Technically Church. Look forward to seeing you soon.